The finale of Severance Season 2 has just landed, and with the entire season now released, it's time for a celebration, right? In the words of Jay. Megan, today is most definitely a momentous day. The finale delivered a jaw-dropping roller coaster of revelations, tension, and emotional turmoil. At long last, we uncovered the true nature of Cold Harbor, peeling back yet another sinister layer of Lumon's dark secrets. In an electrifying moment, Innie Mark and Outie Mark finally made contact, blurring the lines between their two realities. Meanwhile, Helly, or should we say Helena, locked eyes with the woman whose husband she's destined to steal, her seemingly confident smile masking the storm brewing beneath. Across the room, Gemma's desperate cries for Mark echoed, adding an agonizing weight to the scene. Mr. Milch, pushed to his breaking point, teetered on the edge of a meltdown. But the real shocker? MDR and CNM uniting, setting the stage for an audacious rebellion within Lumon's suffocating walls. The pieces are in motion. The stakes have never been higher, and the battle for freedom is just beginning. It was, without a doubt, one of the best season finales of a TV series I've seen in a long time. Every tiny piece of dialogue hit hard, and the progressive tempo change from start to finish had me feeling excited and screaming at the TV. So with that, let's dive into this finale and discuss all things Severance Season 2, Episode 10, The Birthing Cabin. The birthing cabin scene was one of the most brilliantly crafted moments in the show's history. What started as a seemingly slow exchange, Mark's Innie and Outie recording their responses, stepping outside, and waiting for the next message soon transformed into something extraordinary. As the dialogue unfolded, the back and forth evolved into a seamless, almost real-time conversation, blurring the boundary between their two existences. The clever editing and framing made it feel as if they were truly face-to-face, creating an eerily authentic and deeply emotional moment. It wasn't just a conversation, it was a rare collision of two fractured selves, making this scene one of the most memorable and thought-provoking in the series. This was the moment Innie Mark discovered that because he hadn't completed Cold Harbor, Gemma was still alive. He had no idea why he was in the birthing cabin or what Miss Coble wanted from him. But after listening to Mark scout and realizing that he was crucial to rescuing Gemma, the true moral dilemma of the season came to light. What is the value of an Innie's life compared to an Outie's? We saw this question arise throughout the season through Helly, whose body was taken over by Helena, while on the SAD floor, leaving her feeling used, and through Dylan, who longed for a life with Gretchen. But we hadn't properly seen it with Mark until now. Mark Scout's plan to rescue Gemma meant that once she was saved, they could prove she had been kidnapped, which would expose Lumon and bring the company to its knees. On the surface, this seemed like the perfect outcome. Mark and Gemma would get their happy ending, and the season's overarching goal would be achieved. However, in practical terms, if Lumon collapsed and the severed floor shut down, all the Innies working on the SAD floor would cease to exist. Their lives, though unfulfilled, still had value, yet they would be wiped out without a second thought. Innie lives matter because they form relationships, experience emotions, and create memories, things their Outies know nothing about. Innie Mark himself said, "We find ways to feel whole. Whatever this life is, it's all we have." But in the grand plan that Mark, Devon, and Coble were devising, the Innies were merely an afterthought seen as disposable. One Outie's life would be saved at the cost of every single Innie. Outie Mark claimed he would go through with reintegration so Innie Mark could share some version of life with him. But through Devon, we learned he was lying. Innie Mark was right to be skeptical. What began as an intriguing, almost hopeful exchange between an Innie and an Outie quickly spiraled into a tense, emotionally charged confrontation. The moment Outie Mark casually referred to Helly as Helena, Mark's sharp reaction wasn't just resistance, it was raw, unfiltered emotion. In that instant, we saw his deep care for Helly and his growing realization that he was being used. This wasn't just about names, it was about identity, autonomy, and betrayal. Mark, who had never shown real concern before, suddenly played the part of the understanding counterpart. But it was all for his own benefit. The truth was painfully clear, he didn't truly care. And Mark knew it. The scene crackled with tension, turning what should have been a moment of connection into a battle for self-worth. This was a dynamic the show hadn't explored in depth before. Visually, the scene was structured brilliantly. Mark was placed outside in a dark, cold environment, while Mark was inside a warmly lit cabin by the fire. This not only reflected their and labels, but also symbolized the power dynamic they now found themselves in. It foreshadowed the darkness Mark would embrace by the end. Mark no longer holds the power. Mark chose to stay with Helly inside Lumon, while Mark was left out in the cold, both literally and figuratively. Another brilliant aspect of this scene was the way the camera moved ever so slightly closer to both and Mark as the conversation progressed. This subtle shift built intensity, making the pressure feel almost suffocating. And by focusing on their eyes, the show emphasized the emotional depth of their conflict. That despite both of them sharing the same appearance, what was going on inside their minds and behind their eyes was completely different. What is Cold Harbor? The cabin scene didn't just deliver an emotional punch, it unraveled one of the show's most haunting mysteries. This was the moment we finally understood the true purpose behind Mark's work and its eerie connection to Cold Harbor. The seemingly random numbers he instinctively reacted to weren't just data, they were fragments of something far more personal. In a chilling revelation, we learned that these numbers represented the psychological makeup of Mark's wife, Gemma. Each data point was a window into her mind, a digital imprint of her emotions: sadness, woe, frolic, malice, and dread, all carefully sorted into crates like pieces of a fractured soul. The job wasn't about mindless categorization. It was about breaking down a person, reducing human emotion to something cold, clinical, and disturbingly controlled. It was essentially the building blocks of her mind, and every file that Mark completed would form a new consciousness and personality for her. This is why we saw her acting completely differently and not truly remembering anything when she would enter these different rooms on the testing floor. Mark and Gemma's entire purpose was to complete the 25 different refinement categories. And once they were done, both of them would be eliminated. That refers to Mark, not the Audi, and then Gemma would die after it was completed. The reason Gemma would die upon completion was that she was essentially the host of this new Sing chip that had 25 different individual personalities. Dr. Ma was set to extract it from her, something that had never been done before, and most likely came with deadly consequences. The Cold Harbor room was something we were constantly left wondering about throughout the entirety of the season. When Gemma finally walked into the room, we saw that it was empty except for a baby's crib that she was told to dismantle. She was made to wear the clothes she had worn on the day Lumon took her, which was around the time that she and Mark lost their unborn baby, as if to evoke some emotional response. Additionally, the song I'll Be Seeing You, which played over episode 7 when Mark was dismantling the crib, and caused her to remember the emotions and feelings of Mark taking it down in the present day due to the loss, was also played in the room. But the most interesting thing about the Cold Harbor room was that, as Gemma walked in, she didn't know who she was or what she was supposed to be doing. Both Ma and James referred to this as beautiful. There was a barrier within her mind, and it was as if this personality was a blank slate, one that numbed her to pain, suffering, and the memories that could make her feel such emotions. The stimuli around Gemma, such as the crib, the music, and the outfit, showed that the outie Gemma was buried so far beneath that she was unreachable. The intention of extracting the chip was most likely to roll it out to the public and implement it into those willing to get it. The possibility of adopting multiple different personalities meant that, for various tasks, experiences, or scenarios, one could simply switch to an alternative personality, freeing themselves from fear or pain, while another personality bore the burden. This reinforced the idea that the innie was the one who suffered the consequences. When Mark entered the room, the spouse, as the doctor referred to him, became the stimulus that caused her to crack, ruining what was supposed to be a momentous day. Gemma had the chip in her mind that Lumon had spent a lot of time and effort perfecting, and now she had slipped out of the stairwell exit on the cusp of freedom. What was meant to be a triumphant day became its opposite. Mark completing Cold Harbor with Helly. The scene where Mark completed Cold Harbor was unexpectedly emotional. This moment had been 2 seasons in the making, which made it feel even more powerful as it unfolded. At this point, we didn't know if any Mark was going to go through with the rescue mission for Gemma. Once Helly arrived on the severed floor, I questioned it even more. As the scene played out, we saw both of them reflecting on their time together and sharing their experiences from the previous night. Mark spoke about being in the birthing cabin and what would happen once he completed Cold Harbor. Helly mentioned how James said he saw Keir in her, something I'll touch on in the next section of the video. They also expressed how much they cared for each other and wanted to live together. Helly had almost made peace with the fact that Mark needed to go, but neither of them truly wanted that. She said, "At least you'll have a chance at living," referring to the reintegration program he might have gone through. But still, it wasn't enough for Mark. When Helly said, "But I'm her," in response to Mark expressing his desire to live with her, it highlighted that Helly was a different kind of innie. Because she was the daughter of an Egan, no matter how much they wanted to be together, it simply wouldn't be possible. This also tied into Harmony, saying, "There'll be no honeymoon ending for you and Helly, Mark." The way this scene played out felt comparable to a moment in a TV show or movie where a character is dying and saying their final words. Their final words to their partner genuinely felt emotional, with the line, "I wish we had more time," spoken by Helly. There was a sense of grief overshadowing the entire scene. Later, when Hel said to Mark, "See you at the equator," it was a simple yet beautiful line. Helly even referenced her first conversation with Mark in Season 1, Episode 1, mentioning Delaware and recalling their joke about the equator. In that moment, there was a deep sense of reflection and emotion, making it feel like their time together was truly coming to an end. A comparable emotional moment occurred when the alarm sounded at the end of the episode. Amidst all the chaos, Helly stopped, looked up, and smiled as if she was proud that Mark had almost completed the rescue mission. With Cold Harbor completed and the 25th file finalized, the celebrations began, with the robotic wax model of Keir thanking Mark and hailing him as one of the most important figures in Lumon's history. This was reinforced by the mural of Mark about to press the final key, standing before Woe's Hollow and surrounded by the employees he had interacted with during his time at Lumon. It was a clear indication that he was a true part of the company's history. Helly and Jane Egan. There were many great interactions between characters in this episode, including Drummond and Laura from Amelan, Nurture Bee, Milch and Dylan, and even Mark and Gemma at the end. However, the funniest interaction was between James and Helly. It even surpassed Milch running out like a school kid rushing to recess. Helly calling James out to his face for being extremely weird was genuinely hilarious. I initially thought this interaction would lead to Helly being offered the chance to live under the overtime contingency protocol. James essentially admitted that he didn't love his daughter, saying he once saw Keir within her, but that presence faded as she grew. This also clarified James' use of the birthing cabin, revealing that he had fathered many children in the hopes that one would exhibit Keir's traits and take over his reign instead of Helena. However, His statement that he saw Kier in Helly suggested that he valued her innie more than her outie. She had seemingly achieved something no one else had in embodying Kier's values. This could be an intriguing development moving forward. If Jame values Helly's innie more than her outie, she might find herself in a difficult position. She now has the opportunity to live the life she always wanted, rather than the fragmented existence she currently endures. However, I doubt she would accept such an offer, given her disdain for the Egans and her belief that both Jame and Helena are monsters. Still, this theme will likely return in the next season. Jame didn't explain why he was there when Helly asked, but it seems likely that he plans to use her due to the Kier-like qualities he sees in her. Severance Season 2, Episode 10, Ending Explained. The finale's ending was even better than the Season 1 finale, which I didn't think would be possible. With CNN playing their music and dancing away, Helly and Dylan did their best to keep Milch locked in the bathroom to prevent him from interfering with Mark. Milch eventually ordered the band to stop and return to their departments, which they planned to do. However, Helly rallied them with an inspiring speech about their half-lived lives, making them realize they were viewed as disposable and that they needed to fight for themselves. Milch eventually broke free, but when he emerged, he found Dylan leading an army against him. It was a powerful moment, signifying that the workers of Lumon were now prepared to rise up against management rather than submit. This conflict will undoubtedly continue into the next season. Right now, the workers have the upper hand because they outnumber management. However, their ultimate goal remains unclear. Eventually, they will have to leave, and when they do, they will face severe consequences unless they plan to remain on the severed floor for an extended period. Meanwhile, Mark held Mr. Drummond hostage after he had quite literally tried to kill him. I didn't expect that from Drummond. He was willing to take Mark's life just because he tried to open a door. It was an extreme overreaction, especially since it would have meant the death of Mark's outie. However, it tied into the idea that Mark's service to Lumon was complete, and they were ready to dispose of him, as Harmony Coble had previously hinted. What I loved about Mark's search for the exit hallway was how it mirrored the opening scene of the first episode. Just like in the beginning, everything looked the same, and he was utterly disoriented. This parallel reinforced the idea that, despite all that had changed, the severed world remained as confusing and restrictive as ever. The situation was intense. He wanted to find one specific location. But even with directions, the white walls and maze-like structure of the severed floor dominated his mind. As he reached the testing floor, we saw that Mark Zinn switched to his ATI as we expected. However, when he did, the stun gun that Mark had went off. As he transitioned, it must have caused his finger to twitch, pulling the trigger. This resulted in Mr. Drummond being no more, and Mark was covered in his blood, something that came in handy, because when he reached the Cold Harbor door, he was able to use the blood on his tie to get in. When Mark and Gemma laid eyes on each other for the first time, I was overwhelmed with emotion. Mark had believed his wife was dead for the longest time, and now he was seeing her for the first time in several years, in a state he never thought he would. I didn't even know if we'd see them reunite this season, so when it happened, it hit hard. The fact that she didn't recognize him due to Cold Harbor was something I wasn't sure would interfere, but she followed him and ultimately left the room. That's when we got to see their true reaction. As both Mark and Gemma ran for the elevator to return to the severed floor, the innie would take over Mark, and Miss Casey would take over Gemma. Dr. Ma shouted, "You'll kill them all!" as the door shut. This could be interpreted as the people on the S floor being killed due to Lumon, potentially being exposed, which is what Mark, Devon, and Harmony said could happen. Or it could be Dr. Ma referring to the 24 different personalities he had come to know in Gemma. If she stepped outside and returned to the outside world as Gemma Scout, Every personality he had formed a connection with would no longer be accessible. They would all essentially be killed. So, I think it could refer to that as well. Mark fulfilled his mission of rescuing Gemma and got her outside of the stairwell. But when it was his turn to leave, he hesitated. As he turned around, Helly was there. Honestly, when I saw her in the background, I groaned because I knew there was no chance he was going to leave now. The one person who was going to keep him on the severed floor and away from his outties life was now right in front of him. Helly did say she wished they had more time together. And it seems like now they're going to get it with Gemma screaming in the background for Mark to go outside and be with her. The roles were now reversed. The Mark she knew was trapped inside, and now she had the freedom on the outside. The nature of Helly's actions being so cruel to Gemma by leading Mark away was unusual for her. It makes me think the Glasgow block could have been enabled, and Helena could have taken control again. We know how much Helena cared for Mark, as she had never really experienced the kind of emotions outside that she did when she was with him. She had already committed a cruel act to be with him by betraying him and Irving, so there's nothing to say she wouldn't do it again, especially if it meant getting what she wanted. Earlier in the episode, Helly was seen saying, "But I'm her," when Mark said he wanted to spend more time with her. I wonder if that was something the showrunners wanted us to take literally, or if it was actually Helena. Could her betrayal connect to what James said at the start of the episode that he saw the fire of Keir within her? What she did at the end felt like a true Egan act. If it was indeed Helly, it could show that Keir exists within her, even if she doesn't want it to. Mark and Helly linked arms and ran down the hallway just as Mark did in episode 1, just as he did in the finale, and just as he did with Gemma only moments earlier. I was devastated for Gemma, but it showed that Innie Mark was taking control. He wasn't prepared to die for the sake of one person, and he wasn't prepared to let every single Innie on the severed floor spend the rest of their existence in eternal darkness, because the severed floor would cease to exist. I do wonder, though, if Gemma is on the outside, is this Mark showing that he would rather die alongside the rest of the Innies than just walk away and go through the reintegration process? Because at least this way he gets more time with Helly. That could very well be the case. Mark showed that the life of an Innie has value, and even if their existence is perceived as a nightmare from the outside, there is beauty in what they have, however little it may be. Their existence is enough to warrant value, and they should not be seen as disposable. The Innies now hold the power for the first time in the show, and it's a dynamic that will be fascinating to explore further. With the song "The Windmills of Your Mind" playing as Mark and Helly ran at the end, it reinforced the emotional weight of the moment and left us with an unforgettable cliffhanger. Connect to the fact that within the show, the subject's mind is at the epicenter and is confusing. The song is said to be about someone who is unsure of what to do next, which perfectly encapsulated the position Mark was in during those final moments. Severance Season 2 Episode 10 Review. I thought this was simply a phenomenal episode of the show. I think it could be the best the show has ever produced. It's up there with episodes 4 and 7 of this season, for sure. The pacing was something that really impressed me. The first half focused on immersing us slowly, with scenes in the cabin, MDR with Mark and Telly, and Dylan finding purpose in his Innie self. The fact that he was a motivating factor for himself to become a better version was compelling. Then, in the second half, from the moment Cold Harbor was 100% complete, and the band came out, all hell broke loose. While the mystery wasn't as present, it didn't need to be. It was action-packed, exciting, and filled with emotion. One thing I was a little disappointed about was the absence of Irving in this episode. I hope this means we will actually see where he went when the show returns for Season 3. I just hope the character is okay. With the uprising taking place and what seems to be an impending battle between employees and the higher-ups at Lumon, there is potential for a great season opener. Speaking of battles, the scene where Dylan screamed and came out of nowhere to save Helly by pushing the vending machine in front of the doorway was just perfect. That Dylan scream is genuinely iconic at this point. We also got the dance scene that we were all waiting for. I didn't think they would one-up the one from season 1, but this one was just perfect. Millis absolutely owning the space had me in stitches. Despite contradicting everything we've come to expect from Lumon in terms of design, tone, and mood, it just worked so well. Emotions were at the heart of this episode for me. They hit the hardest when Helly and Mark shared what felt like their final moments together. The darkness surrounding the room, with sheer light focused on their faces, captured their emotions and the deep sadness of the moment. Mark and Gemma's reunion after what felt like 2 seasons in the making was another highlight. The smile on Mark's face and their embrace were filled with love, passion, and relief. The entire scene of Mark navigating the testing floor was incredible. Seeing Mark covered in blood starkly contrasted with the pristine white surroundings. The offering of the goat wasn't entirely explained, but it seemed like a sacrifice to guide Gemma once her chip was extracted, and she died at Kay's door. This makes me think goats are viewed as sacred in this world, and their purpose in Kism is that of guidance. Lore's comment, "How many more must I give?" suggests they have tested on many people, leading to numerous deaths. I imagine we'll learn more about the goats when the show returns for season 3, especially since there were statues of them at Salt's Neck. It's a poignant figure, much like the Joker, so hopefully, Kism's law will be explored further. This season of Severance has been one hell of a ride, finishing with an incredible crescendo. I'm absolutely devastated that it's over, because it has provided some of the best television we've seen, not just this year, but in many years. It's definitely the best show of the year so far, and it will take a lot to knock it from the top spot, with Ben Stiller saying that it won't take another 3 years for a new season. I hope that's true. If we only have to wait around a year or a year and a half, that would be quite good by today's standards. Before I wrap up, I just want to say thank you for tuning into all the breakdowns I've done on Severance. I know many people are covering it, so it means a lot that so many of you returned every week, watched the videos, and engaged in the comments with your theories. It's been great reading and discussing them with you. So there you have it, Severance Season 2 Episode 10, Ending Explained. If you want to see every episode of Season 2 broken down, click on the card in the top corner for the playlist. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of the finale? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.